Summer hasn't even started yet, but far north Queensland has already had a drenching with record-breaking falls. La Nina is the weather pattern responsible for Cyclone Yasi and Queensland's floods, and it's developing again. Climatologist Professor Roger Stone has been studying the conditions and says it's looking like another wet, hot summer. He spoke to Jenny Woodward about what we should expect this time around.
Roger Stone, thanks for joining us on 7:30 Queensland. The SOI is in a rapidly rising phase, as it's described, and there's talk about a late set La Nina. Do you think that that's happening?
Yes, indeed. Yes, the La Nina's already there, and the Americans have declared that over the last couple of months. So it's now becoming slightly stronger, as you're picking up from the SOI is tracking that quite well. So I think that's all part and parcel of the pattern we should expect to continually evolve as we go through summer. So it's a bit later than usual. Some of these La Nina events, and El Nino for that matter, can start in the spring period, the southern hemisphere spring, as this one is doing. But it can still then travel right through summer and affect us in quite significant ways as we get further into summer, or as indeed we're already experiencing in some parts of Australia already.
So the pattern that's emerging at the moment, what impact do you think that's going to have on Australia as a whole over the coming season?
Well, the coming few months to start with, varying impacts. Some areas getting excessive rain, others not so bad for a start because, as we mentioned, this pattern is probably still evolving to a fair extent. We should update this as we get closer to summer, but it's worth pointing out that some of the more sophisticated models from the US and the UK that are based on the pure dynamics of what's happening in the atmosphere and the ocean are suggesting quite a high risk of excessive rain over eastern Queensland and a lot of eastern Australia as we go into the core summer months, December, January, February and so on. So I think that period yet again is one for us to be very wary of and to take a fairly cautious approach, as we say, to risk management. This is all about risk management. These same models this time last year were showing 5 times the normal risk of having excessive rain. This time they're showing 2 or 3 times the normal risk of having excessive rain. Not quite as high as last year, but that risk is still there.
We've had some wild weather around Queensland in the past week or two, and now torrential rain up in the tropics. What's that all about?
I think it's part of that transition phase that we were speaking about beforehand. I think the development of this La Nina is certainly partly responsible for the excessive rain in North Queensland. This is about the time when one would expect this to occur, and exactly where it's occurring as well is right in the, if you like, the danger zone of where La Nina tends to first hit in Australia. That's the northeast Queensland coast. The sugar regions of Queensland are probably right in the bullseye of where the impact from this particular pattern can move. So yes, it's part of this developing La Nina pattern, and I think it's a reasonable foretaste, if I can put it that way, of the coming months, and certainly as we get into summer. Certainly part of the cause of the excessive rain is due to this developing pattern in the Pacific Ocean, this return of La Nina.
We haven't even got a monsoon trough yet. Is it unusual to have this amount of rain at this time of year?
No, and indeed this time last year we had extensive rain in Queensland before the monsoon had moved south or had become more intensive. The La Nina pattern interacts with all sorts of other weather patterns, if you like, upper troughs and waves in the easterlies as they're called, and other tropical systems. It doesn't necessarily have to wait for the monsoon to come into play, but of course once the monsoon does develop it can make the monsoon impact quite more intensive, and tropical cyclones can become more intense and so on. So it doesn't necessarily have to wait for the onset of the full wet season of the monsoon, and in fact that's one of the characteristics of La Nina and El Nino for that matter, the opposite extreme, is that it can have impacts in Queensland in winter and spring before the core summer periods gets going.
Because you've been talking about the La Nina is developing later this year, does that mean that it's going to last longer into, say, autumn?
Not necessarily, but it's worth pointing out that some of these more sophisticated ocean models, certainly the international models, have this lingering on further into the year of 2012 at this stage. So all that's telling us is to watch this again very closely and not take anything for granted, not assume it's going to break early or late. Just track it from month to month, I think, is the best way through this particular pattern.
We've talked a lot about the impact that a La Nina would have on rainfall, but what about temperatures? How would they be affected?
Yeah, it's the same as last year. What tends to happen during La Nina events is, as you can imagine, we get more cloud. Maximum temperatures during the day tend to be much cooler than normal. Minimum temperatures tend to be slightly higher. And that upsets, the tourist industries and the people that have large swimming pool complexes, because folks stay away because not every day, but many days are overcast and raining and so on, and drizzly, and not much fun for going outside. So unfortunately, yes, it can lower temperatures during the day, but raise temperatures a little during the night.
So to sum up, what sort of a summer can we look forward to in Queensland?
For those of us who are worried about too much and maybe occasional flooding events, when we have a La Nina, always beware of that potential. At this stage, it's not quite as strong an event as this time last year, but the risk is still there. So the take-home message is be very risk-averse and watch this pattern very closely indeed as we get closer to summer to see whether it strengthens to this or that amount. At the moment, quite a few of the models are suggesting it can further strengthen. Therefore, I think we should be forewarned as being forearmed. I think we should take a pretty cautious approach.
And how long will we have to wait to have a clear indication of how it's going to be?
Well, you have to go month by month for this. So we can go 3 months at a time, and each month, as we get to the end of October, you'll be able to have a very good understanding of November, January's pattern. As we get to the end of November, you can go December, February. So that's the way to do this. Not wait for some magic answer, just take our way through it step by step. And most likely you will see the rainfall probability values that we talk about increase quite rather substantially as we get to early November and December and so on. That's the most likely outcome.
Professor Roger Stone, thanks very much for joining us on 7:30 Queensland.